Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the show. We got a good one for you, as always, starting with the latest on Israel's genocide in Gaza, as we continue to take a look at the top updates, including the announcement of a new multinational Red Sea force to respond to Houthi attacks in the area that are not really hitting or killing much of anything, but really raising insurance rates for shipping in what is a very, very critical part of the global kind of good superhighway that is our ocean, including Bahrain, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles, Spain, and the UK, including the US. Lloyd Austin put this together. We'll also get into some of the latest other stuff, just general quick hits from around the just general story of Israel and Palestine. Also, we take you inside the Biden campaign and what is supposedly an alarming calm inside re-election HQ, where the president's aides apparently feel totally confident the race is under control in 2024, despite literally no evidence proving that they may have any laurels to rest on. Finally, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, probably one of the most rabid defenders of Israel out there, says he has found the best defense of Israel yet on video. And no, it's not from him. Break that down for you. This is Newsflash. A little bit of a weird kind of holiday end of term schedule here, as we are, supposed to be, I guess, the Monday show kind of coming out on a Tuesday, or early, Tuesday morning. But yeah, so we start with the top, and we start with the kind of broader news. U.S. Defense Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, has announced the formation of a coalition, including Bahrain, Canada, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and the Seychelles, as well as Spain and the UK, to patrol the Red Sea in response to the attacks on commercial shipping. It'd be interesting to see if this is going to, deter them in some way. These are attacks that, I don't know if you've known, but have not been largely effective. I think it's kind of important time, as we always kind of have been known to do on the show here in the past, is to pull out the map and kind of take a look at the region. This is the Red Sea, and pretty much, the Houthis control 70% of Yemen. The broader, kind of more populous parts of Yemen is kind of the left-hand side or the western side of Yemen. If you look at the map, and they control the Gulf or the Gulf of Aden. They don't control it, but they border the Gulf of Aden, which is on their south. It's kind of for those of you who don't know, Yemen is at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, right below Saudi Arabia, and Yemen is kind of in that bottom part on the bottom western corner of the southern western corner of the Arabian Peninsula. Then obviously kind of leads into the Red Sea. So really Yemen, if they have the ability, which obviously is a big, big shipping point from Asia to Europe and beyond. So if they are able to, Yemen, this kind of the Houthi government there, is able to launch strikes at ships coming past, then even if they don't hit, which very few of them do, I really think, maybe it's like 2 or 3 of them actually have hit, but most of them are shot down by American drones. It still is going to put in a lot of shipping kind of insurance hand-wringing and raising the insurance rates for shipping of some pretty important cargo, which again obviously big problems with the global economy, and they're obviously doing it, I think, very respectably for Gaza. And it's kind of interesting, are they really going to take out the Houthi government? Because that's what the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have been trying to do there for many, many years, and have been doing so very, very unsuccessfully that whole time. And I feel like this is not going to, really incentivize any of these people, most of which have literally no military to speak of. I mean, we're talking about the Seychelles here, like Norway, Netherlands, Spain, France, Italy. None of these people have jack. Canada and Bahrain, none of these people have jack when it comes to the, really scary military resources to speak of. And none of them are really going to be able to go inside Yemen and start disabling the launch sites where these are coming from. So it's really kind of like is it kind of all talk no action? we will certainly see. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes have been reported across the Gaza Strip overnight, very important to say here, leading to more Palestinian deaths, including a really remarkable situation where hospital staff were fired on in the middle of them giving a press conference. The UN Security Council is expected to vote on a new resolution calling for a cessation of hostilities. After the use of the term cessation of hostilities has emerged as a sticking point. I mean, they already passed one that was completely meaningless. I guess maybe they want to pass another one that's also completely meaningless. I do not know. At least 19,453 Palestinians have been killed. And the death toll from Hamas is by Israel in Israel's attacks since October 7th. Meanwhile, the death toll from Hamas's attack on Israel stands at nearly 1,140. They downgraded it again, folks. Meanwhile, some other developments include WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus saying a UN team has found deeply concerning conditions inside the Nasser hospital, one of the hospitals that Israel continues to besiege. Israel has also announced the death of 2 more soldiers in northern Gaza, bringing the military's death toll to 131 since it began its ground operation. Of course, this comes, it's kind of old news now, but something we haven't addressed since our last show. The shocking news, really, that Israel has killed three of its own hostages in an operation in the northern Gaza Strip. Relatively recent, it was like a few days ago. From the release of this episode, and it kind of does show, I think, a lot of it, kind of confirming the notions and bolstering, I think, what a lot of people on the pro-Palestinian side, people who have kind of followed this or really done any kind of research into the practices of the Israeli state, and things like the Hannibal Directive, where they will it's a state practice to shoot at potential hostages so they don't give up any information. And the news coming out, again, that 20-30% of the incidents or the deaths caused in Gaza are friendly fire by the ADF. And they're reporting that by that same Israeli outlet called Ynet, that they don't want to investigate the possible mistakes that were made on IDF or by the IDF on October 7th when it comes to friendly fire, because it would be too morally complicated, which I think is a great way of putting it. Israelis are experts in the morally complicated, to be sure. And then this comes as they are shooting hostages who leave the, I guess they didn't see, but it was marked, I guess, at the time, this little kind of basement they were in. SOS, hostages, Jewish hostages here, Israeli hostages here. They apparently, they must have not seen that, but still, the hostages come out holding white flags and they're shot at, apparently, even after one of them cries for help in Hebrew, which is really, really remarkable stuff, because it kind of even does give way, or, if there's 2 cases of what could happen here. It's like, they shot after they knew that the guy was, I think actually what it said, what they said, it was like a Hamas, because this really has happened a lot. We've seen the videos. I think what one of the people involved said, it was, they suspected it was a, but yeah, so they apparently thought, because they've been lured when this guy shouts in Hebrew, like, save me, save me, save me, they thought that it was a Hamas guy who just learned the words and was trying to lure them into, this situation where they would get red arrowed, if you've seen any of the videos. But broadly, and I think, it was also very telling that when they look at the only reason why they realize, something is wrong, and again, they were shooting people, again, who are holding white flags, which tells you how they treat, Palestinian civilians, I think, quite clearly. But on the other hand, you also have, they are coming in, looking at the bodies after, they realize, oh shoot, we just killed some people, looking at the bodies, and they go, hey, these people look very Western, was, they're reporting in Israeli media. So that's what caused them to stop and reevaluate. Because, like, again, for all this talk about, Israel's a brown nation, Mizrahi Jews, they're again, that is not, there's a certain, reality of, like, yes, a lot of the Jews are descended from, Arabic, the other places in the Arab world have Arabic background. They were from Palestine the whole time, came in from, Iraq or Iran or, anywhere, places in northern Africa, things like that, but they don't see themselves as that, in any way associated with the Arabic world, and would really, hate it if you walked up and saying, you're an Israeli, you're an Arab Israeli, right? They want to, kill you, like they'd be really, really pissed off. Or a Jewish Arab, I think would be probably a more accurate term. But it shows you, the kind of the interesting views of what people kind of tell you the racial reality of Israel is versus the racial reality we see them act out themselves. But it is, very, very clear and very, just honestly to be expected in a culture that, in a military culture, in a broader culture that just values Palestinian lives for nothing and is willing to shoot at them whenever, and is rightly suspecting of being trapped by Hamas. That's why that kind of explains the Hebrew thing. But again, I think it's also very telling. The big thing that made them realize, something may be wrong, was literally just the fact that they had was the fact that they realized that one of the guys appeared white. So, it tells you a lot about what you need to know. Just quickly here, a Canadian youth is accused of terrorism-related offensives aimed at Jewish people. Is facing 3 more charges. No really kind of details on what that is yet. 2 more soldiers were killed in northern Gaza. And, strikes continue to flatten residential buildings in southern Gaza, including hospitals as well. Israeli forces have been accused of vandalizing a house in a raid near Hebron in the West Bank. And the UK's David Cameron has called for increased European coordination on Gaza. And apparently the biggest relief amid water shortages and, really just lack of humanitarian aid in Gaza has been Mother Nature, because it's raining. They used rainwater to wash dirty clothing, and much of the water supply has been damaged. Water system supply to the enclave has been damaged or shut off in the Israeli bombing, and was completely controlled, by the way, by Israel before. It's really, kind of interesting stuff here, in a very, minimal Arab presence, by the way, in that Red Sea maritime coalition that's being formed. So also something to note. But anyway, that's kind of just the general situation. This is from Israeli Channel 12. Quoting an Israeli source, the Israeli television channel reported that Israeli negotiators now face the challenge of convincing the head of Hamas in Gaza to agree to a deal that does not include a ceasefire. Israel believes that the decision of Hamas to publish videos of Israeli captives is aimed at pushing for negotiations, you think? Channel 12 also quoted the source as saying, in recent days, the head of Israel's spy agency, Mossad, held talks with CIA director and foreign minister of Qatar to discuss the possible resumption of talks for the release of captives in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. And again, all I had to say is, what happened to militarily destroying Hamas? What happened? Anyway, next story up. Pretty important one here. So one Friday morning in November, a handful of Joe Biden's top aides gathered in a Sheraton conference room in Chicago. Alumni of Barack Obama's first presidential bid had descended on the city to celebrate the 15th anniversary of his 2008 victory. And now, after a night of partying, more than 100 of them had rolled out of bed to hear the Biden campaign's leaders detail the effort to get the president a second term. The audience had its reason to be skeptical about 2024, even panicky. The fact is, you're down in Michigan by 10 points. That is horrific. It was, in the words of one Democratic operative present, an oh God moment. These operatives hadn't expected to learn about some silver bullet master plan to vanquish Trump once and for all. Still, one had told me they couldn't shake the feeling that for a sophisticated crowd, what they were hearing, the high-level outline of Biden's plan, felt obvious. Another thought the Bidenites were starting to come across as absurdly defensive. Again, just this kind of don't worry about us. We're fine. We're literally fine. As everything is crashing around, they're aggressively calm, I think is the aggressive way of putting it. Another thought the Bidenites, were starting to come off as absurdly offensive. One somewhat sideways best case interpretation from a former senior Obama strategist. Maybe the Biden aides didn't feel it was a proper venue for a deep dive precisely because they're facing so many the sky is falling questions a rationale of, quote, I don't need to be with all these fucking smartasses telling me I'm doing everything wrong, which, by the way, does really play in a lot of, what we've heard about the just relationship between Biden and Obama, of just, Obama being a smartass to Biden, telling him and his aides that they're just screwing everything up. Apparently there was the election was going to be close. This is according to this Becca Siegel, a senior advisor, which is, Sheridan fell silent is his one sentence read, as she reminded the group that November 2020, only 45,000 votes in a few states had kept Trump from a second term. So let's be really clear. They then kind of go on and talk about here, he's being better, the Democrats are doing better at the ballot box. That's Dobbs effect. That's personal, kind of broader Democratic band in comparison to the Republican band. That is not by any stretch, reflective of what people think of Joe Biden, like by any stretch of the imagination, to be sure. So, while commentators and many strategists are aghast at Biden's polling slide and desperate to see a course correction, the president's aides at the White House and re-election headquarters are giving every indication they consider the election very much under control. So apparently, after the November 7th vote, Michael Tyler did a kind of a "told you so" memo. I was a communications director, talking about how, again, just completely missing the point that, Democrats may be doing well, but people still really, really hate Joe Biden. Earlier this month, the president himself inadvertently restarted the debate over his place in the race by telling donors at a fundraiser near Boston that if Trump wasn't running, I'm not sure I'd be running. Attempting to clean up his remarks, he undermined one of his original rationales for his candidacy, telling reporters he was probably one of probably 50 Democrats who could beat Trump. So if you're just one, you're probably the worst. Why are you in there? But anyway, the campaign apparently has a unofficial motto, which is calm the fuck down, trust the process, and vote for Joe Biden. Well, when you put it like that, his advisors believe the political media complex is repeating the same mistakes of 2019 and underestimating Biden and misunderstanding just how low Trump has sunk in voters' estimation. Again, it's just completely wishful thinking. You're coming off in the past COVID. You're coming off a crazy summer of Black Lives Matter and all that stuff, but really just broadly COVID and people feeling like this just cannot continue. We need a sense of normalcy. Right now, people have become incredibly pissed with Biden and also think that he's just simply too old, which I think is really, really clear. 1 week after the Democrats' near sweep of the November 7th elections, the author of this piece here, by the way, in New York Magazine, talked with the Biden top staff. He says, this is Quentin Folks, Chavez Rodriguez, the campaign manager's principal deputy, so it's a pretty high up person. Seems the only thing people want to pay attention to is the polls and not the work. Well, we can't pay attention to what is the work? You're hiring at a pace below the Trump 2020 campaign and the Obama 2012 campaign. So let's be real about that. Again, I really am not seeing any work. Young voter turnout apparently had surged in Pennsylvania. Large majorities of Latino and Black voters in Ohio had voted to protect abortion rights, which is a big, big difference than voting for a second term for Joe Biden. Again, just completely kind of almost getting high off of somebody else's supply. Just like the people are not associating, protecting abortion, and the things that just the general craziness with the Republican Party versus the general kind of like sanity of the Democratic Party as a broader whole. Like, things are doing in just general like state governments, both parties are, kind of gives I would say a better on average balance. If you look at generic ballots kind of bear this out. It kind of shows Democrats are viewed as way more sane, way more under control than the Republicans especially in terms of things like just social issues, which obviously play a very big role. But again, the clear mistake, the people are going to not separate, and kind of when it comes to the ballot box, they're going to be voting for Biden, and they're going to be making a decision based on Biden, just what they generally think about the Democratic Party, I think that is a huge, huge mistake to make that assumption, which obviously seems to be what they're making. And, by playing off results that have nothing to do with how good they are, and saying that they are reflective of Biden's performance, which is just crazy to me. Honestly, they kind of go on to make their best and worst cases here in this next part about the fact that, yes, it is a very long time. That's probably their best case at this point. But again, nobody has ever been down like the Biden campaign have been down in the polls at this point. Also, they very funnily assume that they, they're kind of pulling the, wait till we really get started. Wait till our campaign kicks in. If there's anything like the barn burner campaign of 2020, they may got a point there. Maybe, if he ever gets out of the basement, maybe more than 5 times, the 5 times he was out of the basement in 2020, it could be real scary. You're right. This article kind of goes into the, strategies here, which, are all kind of like the, obvious ones, which, are easier said than done. Some of them are also easier than others. And it's not to say they aren't delving into the polling here, comparing, different demographic groups in different states, and obviously the impact of third parties, and especially in the complete dissolution of any kind of youth support. So they're kind of going through the roles here. To 18 to 30-year-old black voters around Philadelphia, pay more attention to 30-second YouTube pre-roll ads, minute-long spots on Eagles broadcasts, or door knocks. Oh, I don't know, door knocks. It's obvious here. Do older Latinos in Mecklenburg County watching the MLS playoffs in Spanish tune out when an ad on abortion comes on halftime? Are Asian American immigrants in Southern Nevada more likely to respond to a physical mail piece featuring Biden's face or a radio ad full of warnings about Trump? Apparently that it does have an overall plan, Biden campaign does, in some form, that has been in place for longer than Biden's been president. Many foundational decisions in Biden's previous campaign were made by 2 senior aides, Jen O'Malley Dillon and Anita Dunn. By the tradition, they've outlined plans to house Biden's political muscle and fundraising at the DNC, which could stockpile large unever sums on his behalf, thanks to the Supreme Court's laissez-faire approach to campaign financing. Late last year, the question of who would be Biden's campaign manager was a popular topic of gossip in Washington. The position was coveted but very tricky. Democratic insiders widely assumed the bulk of the re-election strategy would be effectively run from the White House, where O'Malley Dillon and Dunn now work, not campaign HQ, even more than usual for incumbent presidents, considering the way Biden relies on a especially tight inner circle. In addition to O'Malley, Dillon, and Dunn, that includes Steve Ricchetti, his fixer, and his advisor, mind reader, and image maker, probably also image milker as well a little bit, Mike Donilon. In April, though, the campaign manager job went to Julie Chavez Rodriguez. And coming from a family of Southern California or Central California union activists, she spent 8 years in the Obama administration before, and this is where I know this name from, it does sound familiar, the vaunted, incredible, state-of-the-art Kamala Harris 2020 campaign. Yeah, apparently Chavez Rodriguez apparently had the well-practiced answer about the age, too, highlighting his experience, character, and work in so many communities. Apparently she was reminded of a recent during this answer, a recent conversation with the tribal chairman she looks stricken. What the chairman said to me is Joe Biden has turned 400 years of hurt into 400 years of hope. Try telling that to any other, I feel like, person who has a normal view of President Biden. 400 years of hurt into 400 years of hope. I don't really, okay. Biden has taken to the road to make the case for a pejorative that he has co-opted from the Republicans called Bidenomics. You may have heard of it, his economic plan. So apparently, one of the highlights of this was when, obviously, he visited, and it makes sense, 1 week before the presidential GOP debate in Milwaukee. Biden was at a wind turbine generator plant, and apparently right then they announced they were going to be hiring 100 workers. And apparently, they're also hanging their hat on the fact that, it does show pretty bad polling for Biden in these battleground states. But if Trump's convicted before the election, it's going to be a decisive swing in Biden's favor. Again, it seems to be, and reading through this article, it's an incredibly long article. We cannot go through it all. But it, really, I'd say the broad themes of it are hoping and waiting. It's like we have a lot of time. We have 11 months, and we can hope that things change in our favor. And also, really, by the way, and misinterpreting a lot of the signs that are broadly pro-Democrat as to being more pro Biden specifically, and in a way that will matter in the general election, which I do not think will be the case. Anyway, time for our next story. Okay, so yeah, on the show today, I also did want to get into this interesting tweet from Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, Little Boteach. So he is probably one of the biggest, obviously Zionist rabbis publicly in America. Definitely somebody who is kind of the more Chabad tradition, and somebody who is known for going on TV, going online, and just doing literally anything and everything that he can to attack people in literally the most unrelated to, he puts a new, definition, I would say, on the word ad hominem. He is somebody who just, is incredible with his ability to just, again, like, he brings up with some people that he's talking to. For example, he was talking to, I think on the Piers Morgan show, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, and he literally he starts bringing up, all the things that, all the skeletons in Cenk's closet, like that, again, have, are bad things that he has done in the past, but also have nothing to do with the topic at hand. And sometimes it could be, really quite, with people who are, better, have a better record, I guess you could say, than him. Like, it could be, really look bad. So the point I'm trying to make is he's a pretty down and dirty defender of Zionism. And, you may be thinking, oh, you would say that you would say that about any defender of Zionism. I would say that there are actually someone who actually does a lot better job, as much as I hate him as a person, is Alan Dershowitz, who's on TV a fair bit of times, and he's very calm, he's very kind of smug, and he comes from he's a famous lawyer, he comes from a position of authority. So I think it just comes off in a much more, appealing, much more effective way than somebody who's just, going on and on. But he, anyway, made this tweet, perhaps the single greatest defense of Israel on video since the start of the war, my buddy and brother, Robert Kennedy Jr. I sent him this note. I'm not exaggerating, Bobby, when I tell you this might be the single greatest defense of Israel on video since the start of the war. Absolutely incredible. Your command of the facts, your command of information, your passion, your moral conviction. You absolutely and completely destroyed and obliterated all of her arguments. So this is referring to an RFK interview on a show called Breaking Points with Crystal Ball. She came across as an utter and bigoted ignoramus. So I think it's very important here to get into this. This is someone that Shmuley is completely boosting. And by the way, somebody in RFK Jr. who I haven't really given too much attention to on the show because I just think he's somebody who's clearly not a leftist. He's just someone who's a kook, someone who is an objectively, a bad person, someone who openly bragged about taking a few trips on the Lolita Express with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's somebody who's just not fit to in any way claim the title of, any sort of left-wing person or any, even any, I would argue the mantle of a good person, somebody who's worthy of any sort of kind of public respect. Anyway, this is how that debate went against someone who, Crystal Ball, who I think is a, pretty, very good and effective pundit. So here, let's listen to him croaking.
Hamas is a criminal enterprise.
Sure.
Yes.
And by the way, I hate to say this, he's never going to be president solely because of this. It's just like, I can't even listen to it. And again, I'm doing this, because he's a bad person, I'm not trying to be, too ridiculous here, but just like, come on. It's just, And again, also, by the way, Hamas, for all the criminal things they've done, Israel has supported them, transferred money to them all throughout. And, Hamas is... to quote the great Norman Finkelstein, if you're going to call Hamas criminal, if you're going to say that they are not, a party to a criminal settlement? Are you going to say they're uniquely barbarous? What are you going to say about the Israeli Defense Forces? How are you going to characterize that? Anyway.
Palestinian, and you talk about solutions for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations in the history of the world.
Are you kidding me?
No,
Even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming Israel?
It's just like, again, the reason I think that is like, of course, I've heard all this before. I've all these freaking arguments. Like, nothing is new, I think, with the Zionist arguments after you do this for listening to these people for about a few months, and they're running through them all extra quickly now. It doesn't take much. It's not really a deep arsenal. But it's like, again, why do they have to be the most pampered? Why is their whole Palestinian part of the UN dedicated to helping Palestinian refugees? Because there's so many of them, and Israel does nothing to help them and actively makes their lives worse. And a big part of that is, you see in Gaza, why isn't the food getting in? Oh, it's because, I don't know, maybe because there's been a siege there ever since 2006, and nothing can get in or out unless, Israel or Egypt was essentially in the pocket of Israel and the United States, unless they allow it. Like, let's be real.
Part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor has no obligation.
Oh.
Israel built 3,000 hothouses and gave them for greenhouses. That would have made Gaza completely food self-sufficient. Gave it to them as a gift. Offered to rebuild the port of Gaza to make it the Singapore of the West. Hamas said, no, we don't want Jew money, we don't want Jew ideas. And what do? The international aid agencies have given Gaza more than 10 times per capita what we gave to rebuild all of Europe after the Marshall Plan. They've gotten $8,300 per capita, every person in Gaza. We rebuilt Europe with $621 per capita in Europe, and we rebuilt it. What did they do with that money? Instead of using it to make...
And again, comparing this to, the Marshall Plan, just first of all, like, the idea of, like, inflation just generally, like, right off the top. And, again, over a pretty extended period of time, this aid has been, going in. But, again, why hasn't, for example, the airport been rebuilt? Why has I don't know exactly when. I've been following this stuff since about 2016, and I have been looked done a fair bit of research into past history, and I'm assuming he's talking about in the period of the the Gaza Strip blockade, and I've never heard anyone even mention anything about this fantasy idea of building a ship. Or building a port, trying to make the Singapore of the West. Again, like, if they did that, if they wanted to make Gaza the Singapore of the West, why in the world did they keep the blockade? Why in the world they didn't even let them rebuild the airport, or rebuild the some of the hospitals and some of the buildings that were bombed in 2004 and 2014 and even earlier. The Gaza airport that Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat stood in front of and cut the red ribbon of was bombed less than 10 years after it was open. And what did and is it still up now? Like, did they generously offer to rebuild it because they love Gaza so much? Like, no, it's just a ridiculous. You can point to again, and I would love to see do further research on these examples, because again, I've never heard anyone else even I've heard a fair share of pro-Israel defenders, never heard anyone really bring that up. But and I'd love to do more research into it. But I feel like, just if you look at the basic reality of facts on the ground, this aid is not getting through to Gaza, and I think the evidence that they have that they've been able to Hamas has been siphoning up money is just, again, nothing is provided, no evidence is provided of that. It's just Israeli propaganda people just saying it, people with direct or very, very strong indirect ties to the Israeli government saying it. And then you look at the other side and say, oh, why isn't the money getting through to the Palestinian people? It's like, we have a blockade on a complete land, air, and sea blockade on our little small strip of land that we've been siphoning off and cordoned into, in greater Israel. Like, that is the reality of the situation. And of course this aid is not getting through. They don't even let us fish in our own waters beyond a very small chunk of land, or they'll shoot us. Like, that is the reality of the situation. And it's just like beyond those basic facts, if they were, I feel like if they were so, desperate to, make it, as he says here, the Singapore of the West, I think they would have showed it a little bit more than, just one, offer that no one else has ever talked about.
Mate, there's, Gaza's this beautiful country, white sand beaches. It should be a paradise. Hamas said, we don't want that. They take virtually all of that money and they steal it. So the top 5 guys, the top 5 leaders of Hamas are billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh has $5 billion, according to Forbes.
But Bobby, again,
wait, let me just finish. No, because you made
Hamas.
You are making a statement that is just wrong. It's not Israel's fault that Gaza is poverty-stricken. Gaza should be one of the wealthiest states on the Mediterranean.
They have no control over their own territory.
Of course,
Israel
if you go to war,
everything that comes in and goes out.
If you go to war, no, Crystal, why are you blaming? Why do you insist on blaming Israel rather than blaming Hamas?
I do blame Hamas, but you know what else, Bobby? Our tax dollars do not go to Hamas. They go to the Netanyahu government.
And you know what?
Our bombs, 22,000 of which are being bombed, dropped on the civilian population right now.
You know what most of our tax dollars have gone for? For the Iron Dome, which is a way of not invading Gaza. Our country and Israel, for 16 years, have expended this huge amount of money.
They don't invade. Again, it's like, yeah, sure, they don't invade Gaza, but every few years they kill 1,000 people with, again, American-provided bombs. And there is no way of any sort of counterbalance. There's no way of any sort of incentive because there's going to be no sort of effort for diplomacy. There's going to be no pressure by the U.S. And when, the U.S., they send these, or Hamas sends these, fertilizer-powered, rockets that come out of, wherever, some field or whatever, or, some house or whatever. And that just was there's been videos out there of actually Hamas rockets falling in Israel, in the streets of Israel, and there was one that almost hit 2 guys that were walking the street because it literally just in the most unlikely of all unlikely circumstances, they just happened to be walking by, and they were on the sidewalk. There was a tree kind of on the edge of the sidewalk, and it hit the tree. And the most it didn't hit them. They were right next to the tree, but it hit the tree. And the most it did the tree was ruffle a few leaves. That is a perspective of what these Hamas rockets do and how it should be put kind of in perspective when there is and again, no other population does this after they win a war, because it's against international law. It's illegal. It's this is just so, just completely flipping reality on its head.
To try not to go into Gaza. While Gaza sent 2,000 rockets a year, suicide bombers, and of course Israel's
going to let Israel come in and quote-unquote mowed the lawn.
They've gone in 5 times, and every time they've signed a peace
also
agreement.
Far more than 5 times. It's, again, when you got, meanwhile, if it's not, it's every I'd say it's like the kind of like the Olympics, but instead of every 4 years, it's every other year. One year they do a massive raid on Jenin or the West Bank or something like that. And the other year, it's okay, we're mowing the lawn this year. We got 2018, 2021. They took a break, very kindly for the COVID pandemic, but then they were back right after, in 2021. In 2022, there was massive amounts of violence in the West Bank, and also a few, rockets sent over in Gaza as well. It was so it's just 5 times. Again, 5 times in 16 years is crazy enough, and there's also tons of violence that he doesn't even really consider.
With Hamas, and every time they violated that peace agreement, let me.
Well, Israel also has been killing Palestinians in the West Bank. But hold on,
listen,
I want to move forward.
If Mexico attacked us and we built a fence, would you blame us for caging in Mexico? Well, I don't know what it is, but everything in your mind is telling you to blame Israel
Bobby,
instead of blaming Hamas.
Again, so that is just just a very stupid man just trying to do a very like kind of stupid basic attempt at being like, well, why do you keep wanting to blame Israel for everything? It's just like, oh, like this is the, I don't know. It's just like, why would I want to blame Israel for any, like, do you have any like basic, again, these people are just not operating good faith. They're looking for a way to get you to portray you as anti-Semitic, to portray you as, again, as he's saying, trying to do here, blaming Israel for everything. Why are you trying to blame Israel for everything? When anyone who has a good faith understanding of the history can say, of course you're going to blame Israel for at least some stuff, because they were the people who came into the land, who, you know, did the Nakba, who did, you know, change the land from being, you know, majority Arab to majority Jewish. And that was a very kind of like inciting incident that did set a lot of other things in motion. Like, most people in good faith will acknowledge this, and it just, again, shows you what constitutes for some people the best defense possible of Israel is just a complete and utter abdication of any sort of historical narrative or any sort of commonly accepted set of facts, which is like, yeah, again, that tells you, I think, all you need to know as people, you know, some really kind of nasty people who don't have a lot of regard for, you know, others, call this the best defense of Israel, which is, again, the best defense for Israel, which again kind of does make sense here, is completely and utterly fact-free. That is our show. We are back on Wednesday. It's Newsflash.